This is Angela with Danceable Thoughts, and this is our weekly podcast. Hear it tonight, use it tomorrow. And while the conversations generally are about dance education and dance team directing, this conversation I think will be handy for anybody who has the responsibility of kind of taking care of the folks around you. So for season 2, episode 3, I give this podcast the title, Hey, What's in Your Hurricane Box? Now, I'm from the Houston area. I grew up in the Gulf Coast area. 2 years ago, we were dealing with the challenges of Hurricane Harvey. As I'm recording this podcast right now, we're watching the weather and what's happening, the predictions, and about Hurricane Dorian. I'm hoping everybody stays safe and that no one faces the challenges that we went through. But coming from this area and growing up this way, hurricanes are one of those things we just kind of go with. We're Texans, we do that. I have a very strange symbolic thing. In our family, we believe that if you have a can of Spam, yes, I said that, a can of Spam in your house, then you are somewhat protected from the ill effects of hurricanes. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's my point, is that we all have within our own little family groups, our social groups, our friends, our work groups, we have some silly and iconic things that to the outside world don't make a lot of sense, but to us, they are truly treasures, and I think that that's what I want to talk to you about. Of course, I could talk to you about all the really important stuff that goes into a hurricane box. You need a flashlight, you need batteries, you need all these important documents, you need potable water. Right, there are legitimate things, and I'm just a happy dance educator talking to you. So if you need real information on a hurricane box, go to the real stuff for that one. But I want to talk to you more about that symbolic and metaphorical stuff. So I'm going to take you back in time to what I went through literally 2 years ago. I live in a neighborhood that truly, my home was on the boundary line. One side was voluntary evac and one side was mandatory evac. I was on the voluntary side. And so I prepared but didn't leave. So, there's two levels of preparedness. And I was a dance team director, an educator for 30 years. So, of course, I had ways of thinking about it. So I had two kind of levels of preparedness. One level, if I can drive out of this neighborhood and I'll take all of this stuff with me. And then what if I have to wade out or I have to, be helped out? So that's, the super important pare it down. Does this stuff mean that it will help me go forward? Documents. Those are super important things in the, waterproof box. That's the reality of things when you are dealing with stuff that you've got something that you got to hold on to and you must know where it is and you must have these copies of it. And then there's all the sentimental stuff. I think I want to visit with everybody on this podcast a little bit more about the fun and the sentimental stuff. So that's going to take you somewhere. So don't think this is going to be heavy and intense in any way. But I'm going to start with a little practical thought for you. So I have a lot of educator friends on this podcast as followers. And right now I'm going to talk to my dance team director, band director friends. You have reached the point where you are probably getting on a bus to go to a football game, go to a performance, go somewhere. Well, as good educators and prepared educators, I know that you have a ton of stuff that you have to take with you. Now, I am so old that and my career started way back in the way back. So, no, we didn't scribble everything into or carve anything into rocks, but we had to take everything on paper. When I'm speaking of like emergency forms, permission to treat, all those types of those things that you need because you're taking somebody else's precious cargo with you and if you needed to help them. So we would literally have notebooks with all of that important paper. And I'm sure that most of you working in the public school system have some requirement like that. Now, super cool people have moved that over to some sort of digital savings format that they are able to keep it in the big districts probably have even given you some sort of practical way to upload the information so that they can keep it for you, and it's around. I'm going to remind you, though, if you are working in a one-on-one situation where it's you, I guess one on cast of thousands, and it's you alone, and you want to digitize all of that stuff, hey, don't forget that you've got to also have that stuff accessible to somebody that isn't you. Because what happens if something happens to you? You will not be able to necessarily go, hey, here's my password, here's my passcode, here's this and that. So just as a point of practicality, for all of you super cool people that have moved everything to digital, be sure that you've got, a backup plan. What if you're not able to get the information, you're not able to hand over the passwords, that type of thing? Make sure you have a backup. Just a little practical thing. Important to think about. Now let's talk about those bags. I used to say all the time when I was a young mom and had Jack and my dance bags and my schoolwork, and it's like, good Lord, I'm just a bag lady. I mean, my whole life is bags. But sometimes that's a great way to compartmentalize things. I want you to think about, for whoever, whether you are helping with some sort of little league team or you have your official duties in some capacity as an educator or coach, director, be sure that you've got a bag that is the what if bag, the emergency bag that has the forms, it has the Band-Aids in it, it has the extra pair of fill in the blank, it has the little what if stuff in it. Know what's in that bag and keep that bag separate from your personal items. So I can envision in my mind, it was a giveaway bag from some convention, but I liked it. It was heavy duty. It was in my school colors, and it had all of the important stuff that not necessarily just belonged to me, but belonged to the organization. So if somebody in my organization needed a safety pin, needed this, that, or the other, everyone knew that was the bag to go to. It's just a little way to compartmentalize your personal stuff from theirs. Of course, I know all of you carry your own backpack or bag, and it's got all the things you need to make you happy, your favorite chapstick, your favorite this, your favorite that. But I think it's important to keep it separate. And if you're a young director or young educator, this might be something you want to think about, is just making it its own place, giving it its own place, so that whether you're there or not, they know that bag has to travel with the organization. Just a practical tip. So getting back to more of the fun conversations about what goes into that hurricane box, talking about the symbolic things. I'm going to have a provocative, thought-provoking question for you right now. In this age of everything is uploaded to the cloud and everything is digital, what pictures, what framed items are you going to rescue if you have the time? What would you take? It might be reproduced, but you kind of hope you can have it in that form. So, there's that famous old story about the White House was burning and the First Lady, and I'm not going to get my history correct, but a particular First Lady said, I have to save this particular picture, I believe of George Washington, and get it out, because back then that might have been the only way to do that. Well, what do you have in your life that's framed in a certain way? It's put together in a collage that maybe it was put together for you by someone, and it has that loving touch of someone's personal input into the way something's displayed. What would you take? Okay, I don't have an answer for you. Obviously, I hope this is taking your brain into some mindset, and I hope that's giving you a moment of pause to think about all the really loving and kind gestures that people have done for you, or that you have done to display your pride in your family or your personal achievements, that type of thing. So that's one thing to think about. What is it that, yes, it could be reproduced, but it might not ever be reproduced in this same way? Now I'm going to take that another level up. Let's talk about conversations. So I wasn't going to just leave you in the tangible world. So let's take that up. What are some conversations that you can or should have right now that are most meaningful because of the way you say it, because of the timing and the place in which you say it. So I say this to you because I know that a lot of my dance team and band director friends, you're getting into your first performances. You're starting to build them up. My coach friends, you're setting the tone for a season. What is it that you can say right now that's going to resonate with your students, your team, that will stay with them throughout the school year? That this conversation that you have at this particular moment will stay with them even when they leave your organization, when they graduate, when they go on and go into the next phase of their life, whether that has to do with the performing arts or nothing to do with it at all. This conversation comes to me from, or this thought about these conversations comes to me in a very unique way. So I was visiting with a family member who I didn't really have a lot of history with, but what we had in common is we were both drill team girls back in the old days, and she's an excellent curator of those artifacts from those days. So in other words, she kept all her stuff, her family did. So she's pulling out her old uniforms and pulling up old pictures for me, and she had a charm, like a jewelry charm. And although we didn't share that same history, that exact same place in time, she and I had the most wonderful time looking through these pictures, looking through this, and starting to share memories, not just of performances, but of practices, of things that our directors said to us. We're right about the time right now where a lot of the organizations are having big anniversary celebrations. You know, the Rangerettes, Kilgore Rangerettes have had a big event. The Strutters are having a big event. And I think it's really amazing to think of the conversations that those people will have. You know, we talk about homecomings and meeting back up. The school I taught at for all my years is having its celebration of 60 years and bringing people back together and remembering conversations. I want you to be purposeful, my educator friends. I want you to be purposeful in the words that you choose in these, shall we say, very glamorous moments right before your first performance, very almost theatrical in nature, you know, the go-get-em halftime speeches and that type of thing. I want you to be purposeful in the fact that these words may live on and resonate. I'm not speaking to you from a place of perfection, because I would be very much heated in the moment a lot of times and might get worked up about, you know, what I was worried about. So I wasn't always purposeful about that. But when you have the opportunity, especially right now at the beginning of the season, find some times to be very heartfelt about the symbolism of the things that are part of your organization. Maybe your organization has a certain way they march into the stands. And while you've been spending all of your summer thinking of the how-to and teaching them the mechanics of how to do all of these things, maybe it's time for you to talk about the memories that people have, or what it represents, or how it's received by the community. Same thing about your uniforms. And I know uniforms change and we get all excited with the newest look and this type of thing. But what about your uniforms is significant at what has been passed down from generation to generation? You know, when I was in high school, my first 2 years, we wore boots, but they were nothing like these amazing boots that they have now that are flexible. The boots I had were leather, and they had to be broken in and they had to be polished, and they were not very comfortable for the first, I'm going to say year you wore them. But now they do that. But the look of the boot is very traditional. Same thing with leather jackets, sweaters, your icons, your team branding, those kinds of things. Be sure that you find an opportunity to tell them how important it is. One of the things that I think is missing from a lot of our conversations with our kids is where these traditions came from and why they are important. When I was in high school, somebody told my mom that Golden Girls should always get yellow roses. And that was a thing. And my mom, now I don't know where it came from, but my mom took it as gospel. And so I always got yellow roses. Well, now I'm way past high school age, and I'm actually finished with my dance team directing career. But pretty much everybody that knows me knows that yellow roses are my thing, and they're my favorite color rose. And so when people even though my school colors at TCU were purple and white, go Frogs, and all my years at both my first teaching job at Northwest and then all my years at Dulles, our colors were red, white, and blue, but I always got yellow roses because it was special to me. So my insiders knew. So when we think about simple stories and simple things that mean something, pass it on with pride. Take the time. Most of you have been with your kids now for over a month. You had summer practices. School has started. You've probably gotten all the how-to stuff out of the way. Now let's talk about the why is it important stuff with the kids, because you may have mentioned that you may have had a perfect presentation with the kids and introducing them to the ideas, but they were too worried about the how-to. So they probably don't remember the why is it important. It would be wonderful if you would take time to reinforce that. So, like I said, winding this back around to what goes in your hurricane box. Well, the things that I would put in my hurricane box if I were, to drive out the non-paperwork essential types of things, they all have stories that go with them. They mean something that I would want to pass on, to pass down to somebody else. I could get rid of all of these things around me, but these are things I want to stay with that. Well, what is it in your organization? What is it in your own philosophy of teaching, of coaching? What is it that you want to pass down? For sure, you want to make sure that story lives on, that it is so important to you that it moves on. So again, we started with talking about trinkets. We started at talking about practical things, but now you're in pretty much week 3, the groove of the school year. What are your things that are very important to you that you want to make sure they go with you wherever you go, and they go beyond you when you're gone? Which I don't want to be sad, but it's the truth. So I promised you that I would mention that whole Spam can story. So my mom has passed, but it's a truth in our lives, and we extend this to our families and friends. Is that what became a joke, that when all the people go to the stores and all the things you buy to clear the shelves before a hurricane is coming, my family always had a can of Spam. I remember eating it once or twice, but really eating the can of Spam was not the important thing. It was having the can of Spam, and that having the can of Spam reminded me of all the storms that we had weathered. It reminds me of my mom. It reminds me of my sister. It reminds me of my dad. It reminds me of my neighbors in my neighborhood because it was a little bit of a joke. It reminds me of my friends when I was a young adult because they thought it was hilarious that I had in my cool single lady apartment in my pantry, there was a can of Spam that had never been opened, but it was there. So, you got to be proud of the simple things that you keep in life and the simple, iconic things. Even if other people don't understand it, put it there and keep it there for a reason, because it means something to you, and it's going to mean something to the people around you. If you'll just take the time to tell them why it's important that you bring this item forward and onward with you, no matter what storm you have to weather. So as I wind it up for the week, I hope that this football season isn't quite as rainy and crazy as last football season, but it is Texas after all. So I hope you guys will have a wonderful, first couple of weeks of football season. This is Labor Day weekend. Be sure that you take a nice opportunity to relax and really get re-energized and ready for the big push that is going into September and the rest of the season. I thank you always for joining us on the weekly podcast. Hear it tonight, use it tomorrow. I hope you'll take these ideas and think them through and enjoy dancing them out.